Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, A Thorn in My Side. The man who rules the world takes on an agent from the CIA from the Black Boule in this all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' A Thorn in My Side in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Better get the coleslaw, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. There are rumors that Marvel Studios is about to scrap its Blade reboot. Now, back in 2019, Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige announced that there would be a reboot of the 1998 movie Blade that starred Wesley Snipes as a part of Marvel Studios' Phase 4, and that this film would be one that would be a vehicle for Academy Award-winning actor Mahershala Ali. Unfortunately, in the last 6 to 7 years since that announcement was made, there has not been much progress on the Blade film, as it's been stuck in development hell, and the film has been stuck in development hell with multiple screenwriters quitting the film and multiple directors leaving the film. And with the film basically being stuck in development hell, Marvel Studios was at a point where they basically had to pull the film off the schedule as related to Marvel Studios' Phase 4, and Phase 5, as the Marvel Studios went into a state of decline with numerous underperforming films like Eternals, Thor Love and Thunder, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Mediocrity, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And as all of these films started performing poorly Cinematic Universe started getting box office flops such as Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and The Marvels, Marvel Studios really hasn't had an idea of what to do with the whole concept of their Blade reboot, and the film has basically been stuck in development hell. And the film basically wound up going from being in development hell with multiple directors and writers again walking in and out of the film to the whole concept of a Mahershala Ali Blade being seen as just irrelevant by audiences who recently saw the billion-dollar blockbuster Deadpool and Wolverine and saw Wesley Snipes reprise the role that he basically defined and in Deadpool and Wolverine in a cameo as Old Man Blade. And this has led to Marvel Studios not really having any idea what to do with the character of Blade or the whole concept that they had for their Blade reboot. Now, the entire Blade reboot, as I saw it, was a completely bad idea, and a completely bad idea because Wesley Snipes basically redefined the character of Blade from the comic books with his own unique style in 1998's Blade, and 1998's Blade is a significant film to the superhero genre because this was the film that basically revived the entire superhero genre after box office failures like Batman and Robin basically torpedoed the entire superhero genre and had audiences looking to move on. So Wesley Snipes' Blade is a significant film because it not only made it possible for us to have the 2000s Spider-Man or the 2000 X-Men, or even movies like The Matrix. We wouldn't have a Marvel Cinematic Universe or a superhero movie genre if it wasn't for the box office success of Blade, a film that the studios thought wouldn't do anything at the box office. And the great irony is that they went out here and did this Blade reboot with this lack of direction, what would happen is that the entire superhero movie genre would come to an end because Marvel Studios basically does not have a good vision for Blade, and the concepts that they have made just don't make the cut. Because the concepts that I've seen for Blade, one of them was a story set in the 1920s, and another one was set as related to some sort of idiotic premise, but many of these screenplays basically were not good enough to fit the standard of Blade as related to the high bar that Wesley Snipes established for the character. And Marvel Studios basically knows that it's in a really bad place at this point, And if they did a reboot of Blade, it could be the thing that basically signifies the end of the superhero movie genre in the 21st century. That's what many studio executives are afraid of, and that's why they basically shelved at the Blade reboot that had been delayed for many years. They pulled it off the schedule, and now there are reports that they are looking to basically scrap this film because they see it in one, because they think they're going to take a huge loss on this movie. They think they're going to take a huge loss on this movie, similar to the way they took losses on films like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, the Marvels, and the recent Captain America: Brave New World. And the last thing that Marvel Studios needs is another box office flop, because the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe is in a really bad place. It's in a really bad place because a lot of the films, one, are not performing at the box office, and two, they're not very good as related to being imaginative or creative. So Marvel Studios is in a really bad place at this point, and they really don't need to go out here and put more money into a film that they really can't afford to put into it, because again, if the concept's not there, don't invest any more money into it, because it's better to not make a film than spend more money and create a box office disaster. That's what Marvel Studios is trying to avoid by pulling this film. Now, what they're proposing isn't really going much of a solution as related to Blade. Now, what is being speculated is that what Marvel Studios wants to do with Blade is they want to go out here and introduce the character as a supporting character in another movie, and that would be a bit of a downgrade. It would be a bit of a downgrade to, again, introduce him in somebody else's film. No, people want to see Blade be front and center, because Blade is now an A-list character, because an A-list actor like Wesley Snipes basically elevated this character to A-list status, and people want to see Blade taking on vampires. They don't want to see him in the background of somebody else's movie. Now, they don't mind if he's a cameo in a movie as related to taking on these vampires. This is what I propose to do after the snap, where you have vampires who are not affected by the snap, and Blade comes in and then is taking on the vampires after the snap and keeping them from taking over Earth. That would have been a great story, as I saw it, as related to introducing Blade and the darker side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But the studio basically wants to think they can shoehorn him in another movie, and that's something that I don't believe the audience will accept. No, the audience wants to see Blade being the center of his movie. But what's being done here is that Disney, basically what they want to do is have their cake and eat it too on black fantasy, because they see that the black fantasy market is burgeoning in spite of their efforts to sabotage it. Now, Marvel Studios has had an issue with the black fantasy market after the success of Black Panther, because Black Panther was not supposed to be as successful as it was, because what they wanted to do was just make a Black Panther movie to basically pacify the black audience, but they didn't expect that phenomenon to happen with Black Panther, where the film went on to become the #1 movie of 2018 and went on to beat even many of their own white Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, and went on to gross over $1 billion, not to mention sell out all of the Marvel Legends merchandise in that calendar year. That type of success is what many of the white executives at Marvel Studios did not expect from Black Panther, and what they really don't want to see is a surge of black fantasy films and a growing black fantasy market, because a black fantasy market means that you'll have white children looking up to black characters. That's something Warner Brothers had an issue with when Static Shock became the #1 show on the Kids WB. When Static Shock was the #1 show from 2001 to 2004, Warner Brothers didn't like the idea of black kids looking up to a black hero, one, and two, they didn't like the idea of white kids looking up to a black hero. This is why we got no Static merchandise, even though the show was the #1 show on Kids WB and #1 in the ratings. And what they don't want to do is see an image of a black character being elevated as a hero. This is also why after canceling Static Shock, we saw Netflix basically look to get rid of Luke Cage. Luke Cage was so popular, he basically broke Netflix's servers. And the whole thing is that many of these whites in Hollywood don't like the idea of this trend of people looking up at black people as heroes. This is the thing that has them so upset, and it has them dragging their feet on this Blade reboot, because they didn't want to really make a Blade reboot, because the whole thing is the success of Black Panther basically showed again that there was a black audience ready to watch some fantasy and science fiction, because there are lots of black people like myself who have been big fans of fantasy and science fiction for years. We were the ones watching Deep Space Nine and watching Ben Sisko. We were the ones out here, again, watching shows like Static and taping those shows. We were the ones out here supporting black characters in the Milestone universe. And the sad part is that companies like Marvel Studios don't want to see that audience grow, and they don't want to see that audience grow because they don't want the idea of black people, again, being the face of fantasy, because they have that space reserved for white people, because in their white supremacist media institutions, they want to see white people as the heroes. They want to see white people be the center of attention in fantasy. They want us to imagine a world where white people have all the power. They want to imagine a world where white people are the ones being the ones who are the trailblazers as related to this genre. They don't want you to see a black man having that kind of power, and they don't want you to see a black man being in that type of role. That's what many of these white studio executives are upset about. They're upset because you've got a black character that was out here, and again, this black character was reimagined by a black man, Wesley Snipes. And again, this is showing how we're taking control over our image, and this is the thing that makes many at Marvel Studios uncomfortable, and makes them uncomfortable to the point where it's again passive aggressive. They saw the success of Black Panther overcome their passive aggressive plans to undermine the black image, because they basically again emasculated T'Challa in his own film and marginalized him in his own film. And when that didn't work, what they wanted to do was again try to further mess his film up with Wakanda Forever. And that basically, again, the film, even though it performed a little less than the Black Panther, still performed strong. And even more so, they don't like the idea, again, of these series sequence of success that we're seeing with black characters in the fantasy and science fiction genre. They don't like the idea that we're seeing success with Static Shock. We're seeing success with Luke Cage. We're seeing success with Black Panther. And if we got to see more success, again, it would establish and cement a trend. And they don't want to cement a trend, because that would mean you would have to come to black fantasy creators like myself. And they don't want us, one, being able to build wealth in their Hollywood system, and two, they don't want us out here presenting an image of black people that presents us in a balanced and humanized light. That's what they don't want in their media, and that's why they're looking to, again, scrap this. They really didn't want to make any effort to make this Blade movie any good. No, what they're trying to do now that they see the success of Deadpool and Wolverine is trying to find a workaround, with the Blade character, where they can put the Blade character in the background of a white movie, put him in the background of a white movie, and capitalize on the success of Blade, but not have him be a lead character. And again, that really shows the racism that's going on at Marvel Studios. They don't want you to see the black man in a lead role that is of his own. No, they don't mind you having a hand-me-down Captain America, because they know that Captain America with Falcon can easily be replaced. But the whole thing is that they don't want you to see a black man in a role that was established by another black man, because that signifies black people having power, and they don't like the idea of black people having power over our image, having power over and control over our narrative, having power and control over our stories, having power and control over us. And again, they don't like this at all, and this is why they have been hesitant to get this Blade movie off the ground. And this is why I say, when it comes down to black characters, you really don't want to have white folks controlling it, because what they're doing, again, is passive aggressive, and we can't find a way to write a Blade movie. But Wesley Snipes was able to get a Blade movie written that fit him back in 1996 or so, because usually when these films come out, it's usually about 2 years. The script had been written 2 years before, but the whole thing is that Wesley Snipes can go out here and write a black character and give us a Blade movie, but Hollywood just doesn't want to do it, as I believe, because, again, it doesn't take long to find a screenwriter like myself who can write vampires. I mean, I wrote vampires in my novel, Eternal Night. I wrote an entire vampire novel revolving around black culture and revolving around the black church and black history. But you're telling me that Hollywood can't find a guy to make a Blade movie, and that's where I have to say that these guys are completely full of it. No, they don't want a Blade movie because they don't want you to see black people behind the camera getting power. They don't want you to see an image of a black man that's powerful compared to their white characters, because, again, Hand-Me-Down Falcon Cap basically had no power. He basically is not an image of empowerment the way Blade was. Blade was a character that was brought out of the obscurity of Marvel to prominence by a black man, Wesley Snipes, and basically made into an icon of the entire superhero movie genre, because everybody has to give Wesley Snipes his flowers regarding bringing Blade out here, because Blade basically was the reason why we got X-Men, why we got 2002 Spider-Man, why we got 2003 Daredevil, why we got the 2003 Hulk, why we got the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. The entire Marvel Cinematic Universe and every other superhero movie basically was made because a black man found success, and that's what they have. That's what many of these people are upset about. They're upset that a black man basically is one who revived the entire superhero movie genre, a genre that white people want to have for themselves because they want to be the image of superpower. Again, this is all about white supremacy, and again about them wanting power, and that's why they don't want there to be a Blade reboot, because a Blade, in their mind, what they want a Blade reboot to do is they don't want it to crash and burn, because if it crashes and burns, then it proves that, again, when black men were in charge, they were the one who saved this genre, and that's the thing that upsets them, is that they would have to concede to black heroes having power, and even more so black people behind the camera having power. That's what they don't want to concede to, because they see this growing black fantasy market, that basically was built on the backs of authors like myself. I mean, black authors basically, again, created this black fantasy genre, and Hollywood doesn't want that market to grow. They don't want it to grow, and they'll sacrifice this Blade movie to keep the black fantasy market from growing and becoming a competitive marketplace as related to cinema. Now, if you want to check out some of my black fantasy on the SJS Direct imprint, you can check out my vampire novel, Eternal Night, a story that basically is a vampire story similar to Blade and has all of the horror elements like Blade and many other horror movies, and makes commentary on the black community and the black church. You can find that book on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find it at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And you can also check out much of the other fantasy in the SJS Direct universe and all those supernatural stories in books like the ISIS series, the Esteem series, and the John Haynes series. You can find all of those books in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you'd like to see me make more videos taking Marvel Studios to the barbecue, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Coming to paperback and e-readers, Esteem Season of the Witch Girl. The aspiring angel takes on a wicked teenage witch in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Pre-order your copy of Esteem Season of the Witch Girl at Amazon.com and other online booksellers. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way into the increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.